I've tried to do is put together the kind of bigger picture of what it looks like to manage a church building. And I am super aware that actually the experts are probably sitting facing me rather than the other way around. There is so much experience in the room, and that will stand you in good stead because there's a final exam at the end. Were you told that when you signed up? Those people who are the experts will be the people will help to help. You'll also notice we put a lot of stuff on your chair, and this piece of paper, which is on, I hope, on all your seats, is the piece of paper I'm going to be referring to in this talk. I have spared you yet another PowerPoint, as good as they've all been. I've given you a little piece of paper instead. And just to give a tiny bit of context, I think each one of us probably, being involved in church, will have been trained very well to believe that the church is not a building. The church is the people that go to a building. Have you heard something like that before? Of course you have. And it's absolutely true. The point of a church in that sense is to be brave and creative and open and generous in following Jesus, in serving each other and in transforming communities. That's what we're about. That's what Bishop Neil talked about at the start of the day. And I hope, I've not been to every seminar, every workshop, that that's a kind of thread of what's been going on. But actually, having a building is something which can either hinder or can help us doing that. And they can be the foundation for our worship and a focus for our discipleship. They can be the space in which people meet with God, and then in which people are sent out as servants and transformers of those communities in which they sit. And believe it or not, this is one thing I only properly realised a little more recently, that church buildings can actually have a ministry of their own as well, that doesn't actually need any people. So the church is both, in my context here, the building and the people. And I think we just need to be careful, actually, that if we're spending all our time, all our focus, all our worry on just the building and not the bit of which it's a foundation for, well, perhaps something's gone wrong. And so I've been asked to do a talk about the building. And in it, and in my framework that I'm going to present to you, if you open up your little leaflet, you'll see there are some areas which I think are the important kind of foundation in managing a building. And the last one of them is the ministry of the building itself. And all I'm going to do is whiz through this. I'm sure there's stuff missing. Maybe you'll tell me later, so I can do it better next year. But what is in here is some of those basic boxes that you can tick. And if you are a box ticker, I've even put the boxes on, and you can do it as we go through, and you'll feel brilliant about yourself at the end. But also one or two little things that we, particularly in the Archdeacon's team and other places, often notice as little things that people kind of come up against, or perhaps are common issues in this as well. And so I hope that what I present to you is a bit of a framework, a bit of an aid memoir, a bit of a, oh, I haven't thought about that, a bit of a thing to take away. And the other thing I hope it isn't, and what you're not thinking is, gosh, this is a lot of work for me to do. Now, I know the reality of the situations, and I know the reality of what it means to be a church warden or a treasurer or a PCC secretary or all those other things. But I would also encourage you that each box on this sheet could be a different person even. As we often see around churches, this kind of work is best when it is shared, even if there is one person who is a particular officer of the church. So I split it up into, as you can see, 5 different areas: insurance, governance and accountability, maintenance, repairs and improvements, and the ministry of the building itself. And I hope some of this is really obvious. But insurance, you've got to have it. You need buildings insurance and you need public liability insurance. And I'm sure you can all tick those boxes. And For those of you who have ever had, we'll come on to this in a minute, a triennial inspection, will know that one of the things we check is that it's displayed. Your public liability insurance is displayed. But when we're thinking about insurance, it raises another little few things. How are we perhaps reducing what it costs? There's more than one insurer. Have we looked around? Do we have an eye on what our security looks like? Do we have an up-to-date list of key holders? Do we even have a key for the church? There are one or two churches I may have looked after which are never locked. That's a mission opportunity as well as a security issue. And of course, it depends on your context, whether you might need an alarm or a CCTV or a really scary sheep in the churchyard or whatever it is that's appropriate for your context. One key thing to be aware of, and is a particular issue for churches, is lead. And sadly, it's one of those things that still gets borrowed from time to time. And in most insurance policies, certainly in ecclesiastical, they were here earlier, there is a limitation on metal theft, and there are some extra precautions you need to take. Smart water on the roof is a condition of ecclesiastical's insurance, but there's roof alarms, there's alternatives to lead, and so on you can think about too. And in fact, you'll see I've put two little things in orange there, and that refers to and helps me remember to say that ecclesiastical, other insurance companies are available, but ecclesiastical, whether you use them or not, are so helpful. On their website are literally hundreds of guidance notes like this one. This one happens to be theft of metal checklist for churches, but there are others as well. And on the very back of your sheet, you'll see there's a section about where to find help, which is the last thing I'm going to say. And the website address is there. There is everything you could possibly think of and advice about it. It's one of the things ecclesiastical does very well. And the ones in orange on your sheet, I'm going to send out to the email addresses that you signed up with. So I didn't want to print them all out. Of course, my friends in the green tops at the back and so on would have shot me. But we will send you the things in orange onwards. Okay, so insurance, just a few little particulars to think about there. Governance and accountability, this is where you get to policies, and kind of buildings-wise, there are a few important ones: health and safety, fire and safeguarding. Whilst not particularly a building thing, it must be displayed in your building and shared with those who use your building and reviewed annually. And alongside a health and safety policy goes risk assessment too. And risk assessments, once you've done one or two, I want to reassure you, if it's not your thing, they're actually quite easy. And there are, again, lots of help out there. There's a document, I think I printed one off, Keeping People Safe. Again, ecclesiastical provide this, lots of advice, template fire policies. It's all out there to help you. And then in terms of accountability and, helping to support you in running your church, there are kind of two inspections, and all of a sudden it feels a bit like Ofsted. We're sat in school, I've told you there's a final exam, and people like archdeacons, me and Becky and Christopher, and area deans too, come out with our black leather gloves on and inspect you. Well, who has been part of a triennial inspection here? Oh, a few hands up. Did it feel painful? Don't answer that. I think in the run up to it, it can feel really scary, but actually, in my experience, it tends to be a conversation about how things are going, getting to know you, just seeing which are the things you can tweak so that actually your record keeping is brilliant. It covers a lot of areas, but particularly for the sake of the building, two things there: a logbook. I think of this like the folder for my car where I shove everything, the MOT certificate, the receipt for the tyre, all of those things. It's a bit like that for your building. What are the things you've been doing? Where are the permissions for it? We'll come on to that in a minute. All in one, the guarantees, all in one place. So there's a good record of how you have cared for your building as it's been handed over to you from the generations before and as you hand it on to the generations after. Then there's something called a terrier and an inventory, not a small dog, you all know that, but this is the record of your property. And, there's good practice about keeping photos of valuables and a whole load of things. And if you don't know how to go about those things, or you want to review how to do those things, we have templates. We have different ways of doing it. They can be electronic. There are all sorts of ways potentially that those things can be simplified. And triennial happens every 3 years, whereas quinquennial, which you'll notice I can't spell, the only typo I've spotted so far, is a 5-yearly inspection, but this really is about the fabric of your building. It's about an architect, which has to be one that's approved by the diocese. You can use any architect you like for other things, produces a report on the fabric of your building. And this can really support you in producing a schedule of works. They lay it out. These things have got to be done first, these things next, and these things don't worry about for a little while, but don't forget about them. And that then helps lead you into planning, your maintenance, and so on. The next little box. And the kind of rule with maintenance, and again, I'm so teaching you to suck eggs. And by the way, don't you blow eggs? Where does that phrase? Anyway, I wouldn't want to suck a raw one anyway. A stitch in time saves 9. We know this, don't we? But what really helps with that is that schedule of works from the quinquennial. These are the things we need to attend to now. These are the things that are next. And also having a kind of annual cycle of things. And again, I've got another piece of thing I'll send you, which is called the Church Care Calendar of Care. Now, Church Care is part of the Church of England website. Again, I've put it on the back. Again, there are documents and documents and advice about all aspects of all sorts of things from the Church of England on to do this. And one thing I found out today is the star that's Peter, he's sitting over there and he's going to wave at you now. Oh yeah, I made him. Peter, who is part of the buildings and property team at the diocese, has been creating one of these that's even better than this one. So I'm going to encourage him to keep working on that. And when it's finished, we will make sure you get that too. But I just want to point out one thing, gutters. Do we love gutters? Really important to the mission of the church. Keep on top of your gutters annually, and it saves a whole load of other things down the line. We love gutters. And there are other things which aren't annual so much, fire extinguishers might be, but your electrical inspections is a 5-yearly thing. I haven't quite pinned down lightning conductors. I could have a show of hands, but from what I read, it's something between 1 and 4 years to do it. So I thought, well, twice in a quinquennial cycle, every 2.5 years, but that seems to be the advice I've seen. I'm getting shaken heads. You can advise us. You think 2?
It's a British standard that says 2 years.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I happen to know this man works with electricity in various ways. Thank you for that advice. But twice in a quinquennial, of course, the insurance companies steer you towards the shorter time, but of course they cost money. This is ecclesiastical. Here's a simple maintenance checklist. It's not annually do this in January, do that in February. This is more, if I'm looking at a roof, what are the things I ought to look for? A loose slate, whatever else. Again, things like that can help you. And I put this, I don't know what you would have said. If I'd asked you what the most dangerous thing in your church was, I don't know. But I've said, well, yeah, Jesus, that's the answer if you go to Sunday school. But I put ladders, because ladders actually make me very, very nervous, especially when there's somebody who is perhaps younger in their head than they are in their body, who says, oh, I'll just nip up and change that light bulb. And of course, there are actually really quite, I've got another thing I'll send you, safe use of ladders and step ladders from the HSE. Basically, if a job's going to take you longer than half an hour and you can't secure a ladder, you should be using something else, is the basis of what it says. Whereas we're much more of the, oh, I'll just nip up and do it, aren't we? So be aware that our duty of care for those working in our churches, ladders are pretty much a no-no unless there is absolutely no alternative and your foot on the bottom of it is the last of the last alternatives. That's what the advice says. So that's that. Really am circling now the last loop before we hit the runway. You'll be glad to hear. Repairs and improvements. Now, some of you probably went to hear Emma speak about how the DAC can help you. I'm looking for a few nods. Do you remember that? Yes, well done. Good. And we'll have had conversations with some of our teams up here. But from an Archdeacon's point of view, the one piece of advice we want to give you is if you're in any doubt, just ask. Because there are lots and lots of people to help you and navigate you through what is actually quite it's not difficult from our point of view. It doesn't have to be long-winded. It doesn't have to be expensive. But sometimes there are some shortcuts that we know about. And quite honestly, whenever you say the word faculty in a PCC meeting, everybody melts down. Am I right? Yes, of course. But there are some different permission systems. There's the planning system, which is separate from that and is different in different local authorities, and hence is really hard for us to advise on. And in fact, we don't really. We say talk to your planning officer. But then we have the faculty system, which frees us up from listed building consent and conservation area consent. And, there is a seminar on a seminar on all of this. But basically, there are various levels of permission. And I guess you know this. There's A, you don't need permission formally. B, you need to ask, and the DAC and the Archdeacon will make a very quick decision and back you up, as long as it's appropriate. Then there's a full faculty, which attracts a fee and a slightly lengthy process. And we also have a long, long list of things called additional matters orders. These are, I sort of think, like the permission's already been given with certain criteria, and they save you having to apply for a full faculty. They're on the diocesan website, but again, if you ask us, we can point you in those directions. We can help you navigate which level of permission. And actually, I think having that check in there, it's not to stop you do things, certainly not from my point of view. It's there to help you do them better and perhaps cheaper, or come up with a more creative or even a braver idea that goes a little bit further. And actually for the project to be even more successful for the maintenance as well as the mission of your building. Last chunk, the ministry of the building itself. I don't know if you've ever thought about your building having a ministry without its people, but this was just the stuff that came off the top of my head in terms of thinking about that. You know, some of the obvious stuff. Place where somebody can light a candle or write a prayer, have a quiet moment. Of course, your building has to be open. Insurance companies are really supportive of you doing that and can help give you advice about how you can do that safely in your context. What about warm spaces? That was a big thing, wasn't it, over the last couple of years? Or something we specialise on in the summer in our ancient buildings, cold spaces when it's too hot outside. Hospitality. Hey, wait a minute, you can't do hospitality when there are no people there. Well, actually, what about the church that's alongside, a walker's footpath, and there just happens to be a kettle and a few of those little UHT pots of milk that you get in your bed and breakfast, and a tea bag, and some good information about why the church is there. And they, on a rainy day, stop and go, wow, a cup of tea. Simple things like that. A church is a witness in a community just by its very presence. But what does that mean for your signage? Are you in an area of tourism? There are all sorts of ways the building can engage to tell people about Jesus and to minister to them in giving them a space. And likewise, churchyards. I'm not going to go on to churchyards and their maintenance. That's a whole other kettle of fish. I was told buildings, not churchyards. But again, reflective spaces, wildlife management. We've seen some of these things today. Using our churchyard to care for those who come and remember their loved ones and mourn for them. Net zero. Have you done your audit? Have you claimed your 10 grand? Did you know you could claim 10 grand? I'm seeing a few nods. And if you haven't, why haven't you? It's free money. I'll say no more. Ask if you don't know what I'm talking about. Accessibility as well. Alice is here. She will give your toilet a mark out of 10, won't you, Alice? It's one of your favourite things to inspect. But we have resources. She's waving at you, look. Sorry, she was hiding behind the sign. It was unfair of me to spring that on you. But I have to say, the accessibility of this room, a little bit tricky. But how can we provide a hospitality and a welcome in those sorts of things? And one other large area, which can be a little bit tricksy, and we can really help with the advice on, is other people using your buildings. And I just want to flag up that notwithstanding the help that Sharesy can give, which is just astounding, that the other people using your church or using your church hall, if they're joined together as one building or separate, or depending on the deeds of why that hall is there, can just take a little bit of thought about what we can give permission to happen there. And so sometimes it's just worth thinking through that with a little bit of help from us. And particularly if you are thinking of letting other churches, i.e. not Church of England churches, use your space for worship. So there are some particular things to think through around that. And again, we can support you with that. Not just the practical arrangements and the hire fees and the so on, but there are some other levels of agreement which are important to have in place if you have other faith communities using your space. And lastly, put it on, just because it cropped up for me personally a few times, did you know you have to have permission for filming in your church? Oh, good. It's very easy. It's one of those things that there's essentially a standing faculty for, but as it was Felix mentioned, we do just need to check the script. We can support you again in knowing what the pitfalls of engaging with a production company may or may not be, alongside enjoying perhaps a little bit of extra revenue that might come from having filming in your building. I've had encounters with church where filming is happening. It's been a beautiful and wonderful relationship and helpful financially too. I worked for one church where some filming happened in the church and they didn't even know there'd been anyone in there to do the filming. Those are probably two ends of the scale. So I just flagged that as a thing to think about. In my last 2 minutes, I'm just going to say, like I started with, this is not one person's job. And even if you think, gosh, I'm the only church warden and I do have to contend with this, you are not on your own. Because it says on the back, you are not on your own. And because it's written down, it's true. There are the resources I've mentioned, and I'm going to send out just 1 or 2 examples so you can see if they're useful or not. How about asking a neighbour? Many of you, I know, because I know some of you, work already really well with your neighbouring churches. You might be formally together in a benefice, or you might just have good relationships across a deanery or a mission area, or whatever it is. Have you thought about having a, whoever manages the building WhatsApp group or curry or, maybe this is just me, pint. Can you see where I'm going? But a way of sharing those resources, people resources, ideas, time and effort, policies. You can do that amongst yourselves without us, but we are here to help also. And I put down you can see that the Archdeacon's team's emails are all there. You'll spot the pattern, first name dot surname at bristoldiocese.org. And again, some of the folks who've been around today, the governance support who can help you with the church buildings, the faculties, the DAC stuff, property who are more about vicarages and church halls and can support you with letting agreements and things like that. The fundraising team, there we go. Tara waved at you again. Fantastic. Particularly with Sharesy, we just heard about. Comms team, who are amazing. You can see they're all doing the waving now. This is like a roll call. If you're thinking about press and events and promotion and you want some advice, you heard about digital presence earlier. And the Net Zero guys, the environment team, I can see Kit there as well. There is all this support, which is your support to help you do this. You are really not on your own. And so my question to leave with you, my thought, 1, what have I missed? I can see Keith laughing at me. I know Keith quite well. He can give me a list afterwards. I put it in for next year. I know he's got tons of experience. But are there boxes on here that you metaphorically haven't ticked because, well, actually, I hadn't really thought about that, or actually, I don't know where my last quinquennial report is, or whatever it might be? Are there some things you need to take away from today from this, which actually could just help you get things into order a bit, help you smooth it out in the years to come? And if that is so, in a minute we're going to have a reflection on the whole day, but do bear that in mind as you go away. And remember, as I said at the top of the last page, you're not on your own in this. We really, really want to hear from you and want to help as best we can.